He often notices that the moment someone starts explaining themselves too much, something subtle has already gone wrong. Not externally, but internally. It's not about words anymore. It's about permission. The need to justify a decision usually appears before the decision is even questioned. And that's the quiet giveaway. The boundary was crossed internally long before anyone else stepped over it. In real life, this shows up everywhere. Someone says no to a meeting, then adds 3 excuses, a backstory, and an apology tour. Another person declines a favor and immediately feels the urge to sound reasonable, kind, and harmless. Explaining becomes a way to ask for approval without saying it out loud. Like a homeowner nervously explaining why the door is locked, instead of simply locking it and moving on. Wise mentors often say confidence doesn't announce itself, it demonstrates itself. A boundary explained too early turns into a negotiation table. Books like Essentialism by Greg McKeown hint at this quietly. Clarity beats justification every time. The moment someone feels they owe an explanation, they've already shifted power outward. And that opens a door most people don't even realize they left unlocked. And once that door is open, the real cost of over-explaining begins to show up in ways few people expect. He's seen it happen countless times. The more someone explains themselves, the less they're respected. Not because the explanation is wrong, but because it's offered to people who never asked in good faith. Over-explaining to the wrong audience is like giving a detailed map to someone who already planned to ignore the destination. It drains energy and quietly teaches others where the cracks are. In workplaces, families, and relationships, this habit becomes expensive. Time is wasted defending choices instead of executing them. Emotional capital is spent trying to be understood by people who benefit from misunderstanding. A manager who over-justifies decisions often loses authority, while the one who speaks briefly sets the tone. It's not arrogance, it's economy of self-respect. There's an old principle echoed in the 48 Laws of Power. The more you say, the more likely you are to say something that weakens you. Experienced mentors learn to distinguish curiosity from entitlement. Not every question deserves an answer, and not every raised eyebrow requires a speech. The wrong people don't need clarity, they need boundaries. And recognizing that difference changes everything. But this raises an important question. How do boundaries stay firm without turning into cold, emotional walls? He often explains this with a simple image. A boundary is a door, a wall is a bunker. One allows access by choice, the other exists out of fear. Many people confuse the two because both involve saying no, but the intention behind them couldn't be more different. Healthy boundaries come from self-respect, while emotional walls are usually built from unresolved pain. In daily life, this difference shows up in tone and consistency. Someone with boundaries can say no calmly, without tension or drama. Someone behind a wall feels rigid, defensive, and exhausted. They cut people off completely instead of choosing how close others can get. A useful habit here is self-checking after interactions. Did that protect my energy, or did it isolate me? Seasoned mentors often recommend journaling or even reading Daring Greatly by Brené Brown to understand this balance better. Vulnerability doesn't mean unlimited access, and strength doesn't require emotional isolation. The goal is discernment, not distance. When boundaries are healthy, they feel quiet and stable, and that quiet stability becomes the foundation for a much deeper kind of confidence, which naturally leads to why truly confident people don't feel the need to negotiate their limits at all. He's noticed that confident people rarely sound defensive. They don't raise their voice, over-explain, or bargain with their own standards. Their limits are already decided before the conversation begins. Negotiation only happens when there's internal doubt, and confidence quietly removes the need for it altogether. In practical terms, this shows up in small, everyday choices. A confident professional declines extra work without listing past sacrifices. A person with self-respect ends a conversation that crosses a line instead of trying to fix the other person. They understand that boundaries aren't debates, they're declarations. Like gravity, they don't need agreement to function. Mentors often frame this as an identity decision, not a communication tactic. Reading Atomic Habits by James Clear reinforces this idea. Behavior sticks when it aligns with identity. When someone sees themselves as disciplined, respectful, or focused, their limits enforce themselves. Confidence isn't loud, it's settled. And that settled energy sends signals long before words are spoken. Those signals, often invisible, are what make some boundaries hold effortlessly while others collapse under pressure. He likes to say that most boundaries fail long before they're tested, not because they weren't stated clearly, but because the signals behind them were inconsistent. People read tone, posture, timing, and emotional stability for more than words. A calm pause often communicates more authority than a perfectly crafted sentence ever could. In real situations, this looks almost boring. Someone doesn't rush to respond. They don't fill silence with nervous explanations. They maintain eye contact, steady tone, and predictable behavior. Over time, others stop pushing not because they were told to, but because pushing stops working. Consistency trains people better than confrontation ever will. Experienced mentors suggest practicing this in low-stakes environments first. Say less in meetings. Respond later to non-urgent messages. Observe how not reacting changes dynamics. Books like Quiet by Susan Cain touch on this power subtly. When boundaries are supported by invisible signals, they become self-enforcing. And once that happens, guilt and conflict lose much of their grip. Which brings up the final challenge most people face: setting boundaries without guilt, drama, or long explanations. He often reminds people that guilt usually shows up when boundaries are treated like offenses instead of preferences. The mind starts negotiating before the mouth even opens. But boundaries don't require emotional weight. They require emotional ownership. When someone accepts that discomfort is a normal byproduct of self-respect, guilt loses its leverage. In practice, this means choosing simple, repeatable language and sticking to it. Short phrases like, "That doesn't work for me," or "not available for that," create clarity without inviting debate. No backstory, no defense, no apology parade. It's similar to setting a schedule at the gym. Once it's decided, there's nothing left to explain, only to follow. Seasoned mentors encourage rehearsing boundaries the same way one would rehearse difficult conversations. Write them down, say them out loud, observe where the body tenses, and soften it. Books like Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg offer useful structure, but the real mastery comes from repetition. When boundaries are practiced calmly, conflict decreases naturally, and explanations quietly become optional. Most people believe boundaries are something you have to justify, explain, defend, polish until they sound reasonable enough for others to accept, and that belief quietly exhausts them. Because the truth is uncomfortable, almost offensive to hear at first, the strongest boundaries are the ones you never explain at all. Here's the paradox. The more someone tries to be understood, the less they're respected. The more they soften their limits to avoid conflict, the more conflict they attract. It sounds backwards, but life rewards clarity, not consensus. Boundaries aren't about controlling others. They're about deciding who gets access to what and at what cost. This is where the real shift happens. When someone stops explaining, they stop negotiating their worth. Energy returns. Respect recalibrates. Relationships either adjust or fall away. And what replaces the anxiety isn't coldness, it's calm authority. The kind that doesn't raise its voice, doesn't argue, and doesn't ask for permission. Knowing something is different from living it, and boundaries only reveal their power when applied in real time. The next time someone feels the urge to explain, justify, or soften a limit, that moment becomes an invitation to pause instead. To choose clarity over comfort. To remember that self-respect is practiced in small, quiet decisions, not grand confrontations. It helps to reflect honestly. Where has explaining become a habit instead of a necessity? Which relationships improve with clearer limits, and which ones only survive on access without accountability? Growth often asks uncomfortable questions before it offers peaceful answers. And boundaries, when respected internally, reshape the external world faster than most people expect. If this perspective shifted something even slightly, then the real work begins now. Apply one boundary this week without explanation. Observe what changes. And if this kind of grounded, practical wisdom resonates, subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications ensures these reminders stay close when they're most needed. Because clarity, once learned, deserves to be reinforced.